Hi, I'm Quentz. Welcome to the fifth in my series of reviews for Season 1 of the Playdate, Panic's handheld gaming console. Each week, two brand new games from different developers appear like magic on your Playdate system. Week 5's games are Demon Quest 85 and Omaze. Of all the games so far in Season 1, Demon Quest 85 has gotta have my favorite title. And that thumbnail immediately it evokes, well, the 80s obviously, but more specifically that sinister, spooky kind of old school supernatural fiction like Stephen King or what Christians thought D&D was like. Also, it made me think of Gargoyle's Quest, the Ghosts and Goblins spin-off for the Game Boy, which actually rules, so I was expecting some kind of demon-fighting action-adventure game here, and what I got was absolutely not that at all, which was surprising, but in a good way. As it turns out, the game, developed by Crooked Park, is a sort of logic puzzle / narrative adventure game. You play as a high school kid who's gotten his hands on an old demon summoning book and decided, hey, let's give this a whirl. In order to complete a summon properly, however, you'll need to read up on said demons' likes and dislikes, turn-ons and turn-offs, and get everything in order to make them happy. This means offering them their favorite food, playing their favorite music, and most importantly, inviting 3 friends over to assist in the summoning, all of whom need to have some personal problem that this particular demon could help them solve. Because, all demons specialize in something or other, and they tend to be attracted to the needs of mortals with whom they'll make deals in exchange for favors. Like I said, this was not what I expected when I first saw Demon Quest 85 pop up, but I was not at all disappointed because I love these types of games. You're not exactly solving mysteries here, but you are piecing together clues and making judgment calls based on what you've discovered. There are also a few choices for you to make along the way which will affect the game's ending. If you do happen to pick someone or something that just isn't right at all, the demon won't show up and it'll be back to square one, but there's no penalty, so you're free to experiment. By far, the reason to play this one is for its theme, graphics, art style, and writing. It's a game about summoning demons, which perhaps could offend the more sensitive among us, but I love it. It is the only Playdate game so far with a content warning, so parents, look out. The game is definitely tongue-in-cheek for the most part. It's a little over the top, and it is funny to see how these kids change and their relationships and lives are altered by demon intervention, but then they're just seemingly going about their lives like regular high school students in the aftermath. But it does veer more toward the dark humor side of things. It isn't too jokey. The demons are appropriately eerie and threatening. You never actually see any of the demons realized on screen, just as illustrations in your book, but there are some cool effects and visual tricks that make the experience feel appropriately authentic. Jared Emerson-Johnson did the music for this game. I know him from some of the old Telltale Games soundtracks that I really like, so I think that also adds a lot to the atmosphere. Now, without all that cool demon stuff dressing it up, the game definitely wouldn't have the same appeal. I do like the logic puzzle deduction gameplay, but it isn't very complex. Essentially, it's just a test of your reading comprehension skills. The really important stuff you need to read in order to figure out what a demon likes will be written in bold, so you shouldn't struggle too much to solve any of these. It's not exactly Return of the Obra Dinn in that regard, but the presentation is so strong, the game can get away with being a bit on the simpler side, and you get to just enjoy the ride as you see how this weird story develops. There are only a handful of demons to summon, and once you do, the game is over, but again, you can replay it for a few different endings. I love Demon Quest 85, and I love the early trend we're seeing of more story-heavy, dialogue-focused games, but all with very different settings and styles. And something about this one is oddly cozy in spite of its horrifying aesthetics. It feels like you're sitting by the fire on an autumn night with a good book of ghost stories, or in this case, demon stories. Paired up with Demon Quest this week is Omaze, which has no story, no dialogue, no characters, none of that whatsoever. Omaze, made by Gregory Kogos, is an abstract puzzle game wherein you control a little circle, and you must navigate said circle across other, larger circles in order to reach the end of each level. You do so by rotating the crank in order to move around the inner edge of each circle, Then you press a button to zap to the next section until you make it to the goal. Of course, there will be obstacles along the way that you have to avoid, because every time you hit one of those obstacles, you get sent back to the start. In talking about this, I keep wanting to use more specific terms to label things in this game, like calling the obstacles enemies or even calling your little circle a ball, but it's really not, it's just a circle. Everything in this game is super abstract. There's not even any music, just a lot of bleeps and bloops. What it really reminded me of, in fact, is the old Art Style series, which was a series of abstract puzzle games that came out as downloadable titles for the Wii and DS back in the day. And each one of those had its own unique little weird puzzle idea, usually with mechanics you'd never quite seen in anything else, and that is Omaze to a T. It would fit perfectly alongside those other games. Some of the levels are maze-like, as the title would suggest, requiring you to find the path forward, but also most of them are more about avoiding things in your path and interacting with these little puzzle elements that are introduced over time. For example, early on you'll come across these circles that, upon entering them, will have you rotating around the inside automatically, whether you're turning the crank or not. You'll also gain the ability to switch the direction of that rotation from clockwise to counterclockwise or vice versa, and you'll need to start doing that on the fly if you don't want to get forced into a wall. So it's not just a thinky kind of a game, there's an emphasis on reaction time, especially in later, more complicated stages. A lot of times when you enter into a new section of the level, you have to rewire your brain in terms of rotating the crank forward or backward because you need to move counterclockwise or clockwise, and that can change every time you hit a new segment. And for me, that was a fun challenge. And there are also several new mechanics that will be introduced as you play. There are even boss fights, so to speak, which are these bigger, crazier levels at the end of each world. And some of those levels can be really tough, even a little frustrating when you're dying over and over again, but it's one of those magic kind of games with short levels and non-existent load times, so restarting again and again usually isn't such a horrible punishment. The bad news about Omaze is that it is pretty short. Even for a Playdate game, you can probably knock it out in an hour or less, especially if you're really good at the game. I'd actually be interested to see the speedrunning community get their hands on this one. But that length also means that it never overstays its welcome. There's no bloat, no filler, every new level feels fresh. It has a great addictive quality to it. Even just picking it up to record footage for this review, I didn't want to put it back down again. It's almost like playing with a Rubik's Cube or something. Even if you've done one before, there's still something satisfying about seeing the puzzle through to the end. So I do wish there was just a little bit more in this one. Hell, I wish there was a lot more, but as it stands, it's a really, really fun game for the time that you have with it. If you like challenging games that are in this kind of abstract style, it's a winner. Week 5's games couldn't be much more different from each other. Demon Quest 85 is my favorite. It ticks a lot more of the boxes that I love in games and storytelling, but Omaze is absolutely no slouch. It's the epitome of short but sweet. Let me know in the comments what you think about these games, if you gravitate towards one or the other more so. And you can also find more of my reviews of the Season 1 Playdate games elsewhere on this channel. Even subscribe if you want to keep up to date when new ones come out. Thank you. Goodbye.